So you want to see how impressive the Lumix GH6 is when it comes to stabilisation and faking gimbal shots. You've come to the right video. Here are 6 tips that I've learnt from quite literally years of forgetting to bring my gimbal with me on shoots, despite owning no less than 14 gimbals in the last 5 years. All the test shots in this video were taken on a Lumix GH6 pre-production, which has 7.5 stops of stabilisation. So let's have a look. What do you think? Can we leave our gimbals at home at last? So if you're out and about and you don't have a gimbal, you can utilise your 60 frames a second or 120 frames a second in this case to emulate a gimbal by walking in a certain way. I call it the pants ninja walk, and I'll demonstrate why. The idea is to try and keep the camera as steady as possible and using your legs for suspension. So I'm going to shoot in 120 frames a second and let's see if it's convincing. I know what you're thinking. Emily, you've just slowed it all down. That's cheating. It makes everything look good. So from here on out, I'll show you straight out of the camera versus the edited version, just to show you exactly what you get straight out of the camera, which is blooming impressive. I know this looks very stupid, but if you need to fake a gimbal shot when you're out and about, this is the way to do it. Set your focus in the distance, and then go to manual, and then just rock backwards and forwards. Let's talk about orbiting around a subject. Now, your instinct may be to just start walking like this, but if you are facing your subject, it's much too wobbly. So what I suggest is being side on and using your screen, if you have a screen, to help, and basically doing the pants ninja move, but side on. And the great thing about orbit shots is it's quite forgiving because the viewer has something to focus on. They don't mind too much about any shakes. So I'm standing side on and I'm walking. So if you want to fake a crane up or down without a gimbal, this is what I'd recommend. Don't go from the bottom up, because you have to remember that we're all gravity's bitch. The easiest way is to set your focus and go down with gravity, and if you want it to be a crane up, just flip the footage in post. So I will set my focus, and you can hold it on the top or the bottom. It's not like this is a priceless pre-production GH6 or anything. Sorry, Lumix. So you hold it, press record, and then we drop down. Because when you come up, you're inevitably more shaky because you've got to pull the weight of the camera. So if you just kind of let it fall, it's always a much smoother image. If you do this in a faster frame rate and also have foreground interest, then it's a really effective shot. Remember, Emily, we are all gravity's bitch. One thing that beginner videographers tend to do is pivot, sort of this kind of movement. And this isn't a movement that you're going to see in cinema or anything professional, because you're imitating a tripod movement rather than a slider. So when we're thinking about sideways movement, we need to think slider and not tripod, so we don't want to pivot. I'm going to do 2 shots, one pivoting and one sliding, and then you can hopefully see the difference. This is the pivot, where it's a very sort of dad shoulder cam thing where you're following the action. This is the slider. Now it's very similar to the forwards and backwards of the push in and push out. You want to have your legs quite wide and you just want to rock, and all the movement comes from your hips and your knees, and the camera is to your body and quite square, and that is much more pleasing than a pivot. And we lunge.
Beautiful.
Oh yes! And my final tip, if you are faking a gimbal shot, or actually if you are just using a gimbal, is always have a subject. I think if you have a subject for your viewer to focus on, all is forgiven. Basically, if you just have an empty scene, it's a lot harder to hide the movement. I think a small amount of movement is acceptable, and if it goes with the story and there's a subject to focus on, it's a lot more forgiving. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Can we finally leave our gimbals at home? I think gimbals will always have a place to get that really, really polished look, particularly in paid work. But I think for personal projects, when you're out and about, or even in a pinch in some professional environments, you can definitely get very usable shots with the GH6 now. It's the best stabilization I've seen in any camera, easily, hands down, without competition. If you want to learn more about the GH6, then watch this video next, where I really put the GH6 through its paces.